This presentation is a summary of a project the consortium worked on for the New Jersey Urban Area Security Initiative from 2011 to 2013. The summary will focus on three components. In the middle, the projects that the consortium conducted as part of the grant. On the right, related efforts the consortium and its member states were working on outside of the grant. And then on the left, Hurricane Sandy integration and support that resulted when all of these things came together and were integrated into several services that were piloted during Sandy in support of private sector and state and local government response efforts. Here you see a summary of all of the projects on the left that were part of the grant. We'll walk through each of these areas individually and then tie it together in the end. First up was the Regional Rail Security Project. The purpose of this project was to look at documentation and procedures across a number of carriers for both freight and passenger rail in the Northeast Corridor, basically from Richmond to Boston. Participants included several UASIs and states, 12 carriers of passenger and freight, and the Department of Homeland Security's Transportation Security Administration. Some of the outcomes of this project were very interesting. Several of the participants were very interested in tangential projects. One of them specifically was out of the Regional Catastrophic Planning Grant going on in Region 3, where $300,000 was awarded for a project to the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Administration, basically DC Metro, to work on integrating rail data, passenger and freight, into a roadway transportation management system called RITIS, R-I-T-I-S, housed at the University of Maryland. RITIS has been funded by the U.S. Department of Transportation for many years and is a very sophisticated and mature platform used by state and local government in the Washington metro area that provides lots of planning information, real-time transit information. A rail report was issued after many of the interviews with our rail carriers. This report was circulated back around the region. It was actually picked up by Congress during one of their hearings for rail specialists in fusion centers. The feedback we got on the report was very, very good. It allowed the working group to look at what to focus on next. One of the partnerships that came out of this was with the Association of American Railroads. This will be one of the sustaining parts of this project. AAR and the consortium are planning to work together on several initiatives coming up in 2013 and 14. Some of the other opportunities that came out of this was Mutual Link is a solution provider in New Jersey that has been deploying routers all over the state of New Jersey. Over 200 of these routers have been installed at public and private sector locations, from casinos to police barracks to hospitals. And it creates a secure collaboration cloud where people on this cloud can share video camera signals. They can share data files, they can share screenshots, they can link the radio systems together. Well, Mutual Link was so impressed with this rail initiative that they donated a router to the All Hazards Consortium, which is housed in Frederick, Maryland. And the consortium is looking at how to best leverage that across this rail project and other projects going on right now. And lastly, we had an integrated planning workshop at TSA to facilitate the brief out and to plan kind of our next steps. This group will sustain. The AAR and the AHC are committed to, at least through 2013, to continue to work several of the issues and recommendations that came out during the report. Let's go to our next project. The Multi-State Fleet Response Initiative started in 2011. This was brought about by the power companies approached DHS after Hurricane Irene and complained that they couldn't move their trucks fast enough across state lines. So the consortium was brought into it, and it just seemed a natural fit for this grant. So what we did was to help work with DHS and a number of power companies through the utility commissions in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. We spun up this multi-state fleet response effort. So the purpose of this was really looking at expediting utility fleet movements across state lines, not just utility fleet movements, but all private sector resources. It's a very complex set of issues facing the people that do this across multiple states, because every state is a little bit unique, a little different in how they handle specific things like tolls and permits and fuel and so forth. Initially, the participants were 2 states, Pennsylvania and New Jersey, along with about 50 private sector companies across 8 different sectors. So they had power, transportation, telecommunications, food, water, medical, chemical, banking, finance, retail, commercial facilities, several federal partners, FEMA, DHS Infrastructure Protection, Department of Transportation, Department of Energy. This has grown to national interest across the country as now power companies from the West Coast are joining this working group as well. So some of the outcomes we mentioned, we stood up a working group which will sustain following the grant. We developed a contact directory of the working group members. Validating an E-ZPass solution. During Sandy, we discovered that not all trucks need a transponder to go through the E-ZPass toll booths. If there's an online account, a number of trucks can be assigned to that account, and then as trucks go through the E-ZPass, pictures of their tags are taken and billed back to the account. We're going to validate that process across the East Coast to also see if it'll work with the SunPass down in Florida and the southern part of the U.S. If this works, this would be a national solution that everyone could adopt. Some of the benefits to the states are increased throughput, faster power restoration, probably increased revenues based on the feedback we're getting from the private sector that this would be instantaneous billing, and the states would get their toll money much quicker and be a lot less red tape to try to capture those funds after the fact, which is the process they use now many times. Another outcome was during Sandy, there was a workaround process created to move trucks through toll gates quicker. In addition to that, the states are working with the consortium to develop a guidebook for fleet entrance and pass-through requirements. This is a big effort, but at the end of the day, we'll have a guidebook for 2 states that private sector operators can use to help expedite movement across those 2 states because they'll know the requirements. It'll all be centralized into one repository, if you will, of where are the websites, who are the people, what are the agencies, what are the permit requirements, when is there a declaration. This type of information is out there. It just needs to be aggregated. 2 workshops were held, as I said, one in December, and we just held another one here in January 2013, not 2012, that's a typo. DHS provided us a resource of about $60,000. A consultant was provided to help the group, if you will, do some of the heavy lifting with interviews and things like that. This group will sustain, as I said. They formed a working group. They have a charter being drafted now with a work plan for 2013, and it looks like this group will also be conducting joint exercises with the states in Region 2 and Region 3 next year, 2014 and 15. Let's go to our next project. The Delaware Bay Area Maritime Security Committee Regional Port Security Workshop. This was our first integrated planning meeting held in 2011. The purpose of this was really to expose the private sector operators to multiple government projects to try to identify opportunities for integration, where the private sector could actually coordinate their investments and planning with the state and local government and federal government for that matter. There were 4 projects really discussed. One is the DRIP, which is the Delaware River Infrastructure Protection Plan. The DIVIC, which is the Delaware Valley Intelligence Center, a fusion center located in Philadelphia that covers the whole region. SureTrack, which is a U.S. Navy project that looks to have domain awareness all over the Chesapeake Bay. And then USIDS, which is Universal Incident Command Decision Support. It's a very sophisticated middleware that allows machine-to-machine connections for real-time situational awareness. The attendees at this first workshop included the Coast Guard, FEMA, DHS, a number of companies, several UASIs, several states. A report will list all the participants that were involved. Some of the outcomes of that, as I said, was the report, which had a contact directory inside of it, as well as a list of recommendations. And we produced an integration chart that allowed companies to cross-connect with projects. So we were tracking that for about a year. We were tracking which people were interested in which projects and how they were connecting. Created a lot of awareness, if you will, for the New Jersey Mutual Link solution that was now being reviewed by a number of other sectors today. But this was the first workshop we did, and that got a lot of exposure because the private sector was very interested in sharing information with government. The meeting actually showcased about $100 million worth of government projects, as yielded several public-private initiatives underway. One of them is this rail initiative that we just talked about, maybe some other port initiatives coming down the future, 2013, focused on Mutual Link. Let's go to our next project. Early on in the cycle, the urban areas, the major Tier 1 UASIs of New York, Philadelphia, Newark, New Jersey, and D.C. saw a need to begin talking about corridor-related issues and trying to coordinate along the corridor to respond to disasters. So this initially, the group came together was to look at the corridor preparedness and operational planning between the major urban areas, many of the states on the East Coast, and the federal partners at FEMA and within the FEMA regions 2 and 3. The leads on the project were the urban areas, but they invited the participating states and FEMA to be part of the effort. Many conference calls and planning meetings were held. UASIs worked together on a joint governance structure that could oversee communications and recommendations and so forth, like every working group. Products that came out of this group were really fantastic. The first one, during one of the meetings, was a concern about how do we communicate if all the telephone lines are down. What about satellites? So the consortium then turned to its satellite community, of which Hughes Satellite is a provider of that service. And actually that led to a very interesting service that came out during Sandy. I'll talk about that in another slide. They're looking to produce a first-hour communications checklist for catastrophic events. There's also a leadership conference call they were looking at, is how to get the leaders across this corridor together quickly after an event within the first hour to discuss first steps or whatever they felt like discussing. There were several agreements that were brought together. One is an integrated planning framework, how to approach planning, joint public-private partnership planning across the corridor. And they were also exploring and have agreed to do joint exercises in 2013 down in Region 3 with the power sector to look to ways to expedite power restoration efforts. This group will sustain beyond the grant. There's a lot of energy around it, and it certainly has given birth to a number of other initiatives as we go forward. Go to our next one. New Jersey Disaster Food Distribution Plan. Basically, this project was to take an existing effort that was going on in New Jersey with the food sector and expand it across the region. The New Jersey project was really designed around how can government work with private sector to remove all the obstacles so the food sector can get back in business quicker, as opposed to the traditional method of possibly, putting in millions of MREs in parking lots and have citizens come there. This was a great project, and it was looking to develop a collaborative process, if you will, across the region. And the other piece was to look at capturing the different efforts and people around the region that were working this issue in various ways across various states. So the participants included, I think it was about 6 states, including the key distributors and retailers in the Mid-Atlantic region, which were many. There's a report that we have coming out on that. And so the project got underway. Outcomes very quickly. There was some research tables developed for the food sector within the region that listed every retailer and distributor of food that feeds this region. There was a contact directory established as well and produced. There were regional planning templates and best practice guides, and there was a conference call process that needs to be exercised, but it was the food sector recommended, could we have a conference call daily during some major storms so we can get updates on things that we need to get our stores functional. So that process was developed and needs to be approved and exercised going forward. All in all, this project yields some very tangible products, and these people involved in this project also were very much interested in the multi-state fleet project, since the movement of resources affects their stores. Let's go to our next project. Outside of the grant, there were many separate efforts going on. I won't walk through all of these, but Hughes Satellite worked with us. We started working with their operations department and actually leveraged their customer database to determine during Sandy what customers were up or down based on the satellite link data. In addition, the New Jersey social media pilot was about a $250,000 pilot that ended 3 days before Sandy. The company that provided that was a group called Cyvalence. They provided for the White House, Congress, the Pentagon, a lot of high-profile private sector companies. They're the best of breed in the social media monitoring and alerting business. They were very interested in the first UASI workshop. The UASIs wanted to explore this further, so what we ended up doing was hosting a pilot project in New Jersey to explore the use of this technology. Well, when Sandy hit, the consortium contacted Cyvalence and asked them, hey, would you continue the pilot? We've got a lot of people hurting. Well, of course, they agreed to do it during Sandy for another week. Put a huge amount of resource into that, probably another 250,000 analyst time and software to monitor things. It was incredible what happened out of that. But that was another project that came on alongside this grant. Additionally, the New Jersey Infrastructure Advisory Council has been in place for many years, and the consortium started working very closely with some of that leadership there. That proved invaluable during Sandy. Schneider Corporation sponsored a situational awareness workshop. This was an outcome of the Urban Area Working Group discussions. The workshop was funded by MITRE, and it was looking at what are the common ways or common standards that can be used to communicate information and data. What came out of that workshop was it's going to be a long time before there's a single standard, but clearly the lowest common denominator was Excel spreadsheets and delimited text files. Although clunky, everyone could use them. And then lastly, there were a number of regional catastrophic planning grant program, the RCPGP grant program going on around the country. Well, in Region 3, the states were working on a housing project, which lo and behold got activated during Sandy to find housing for citizens that were homeless and relief workers that came in. So when Sandy hit, let's go to our next slide, all of this came together in 6 different areas. All these partners, the products that these projects were helping to produce, and the collective brain trust were all brought together very quickly to help Sandy with the impact. First one here is the social media trending and incident reporting. This was a big help in that the reports that came out of this identified citizens that were in danger. It identified false things, rumors. There was a shark reported in the Toms River that was proved to be photoshopped in, and service watched for looting and property damage. In one case, there was a gentleman in the Toms River in a pickup truck that was drowning. The water was rising, and he was tweeting to save his life. One of the analysts picked it up in the middle of the night, called the New Jersey police, and by chance they had a chopper in the air and they rescued him. And there were dozens and dozens of reports that came through social media that were provided by this service back to emergency managers and state police that helped catch a lot of things long before people knew they were a problem. Second service here really came from the rail group. American Association of Railroads opened up their private alerting and information reports to the consortium, who quickly fed it out to our member states. But this report information was valuable to our states. It's not something they regularly see. We're going to look to continue that going forward. The private sector that was participating in some of these efforts used that information in the rail report to bring in critical workers, relief workers, and essential personnel. The next one is our private sector resource reports that were sent to the states. This received a lot of attention in that this report came from Hughes and 6 other companies that the consortium started to work with. It basically provided information on what gas stations, fast food, convenience stores, pharmaceuticals, and hotels were open or closed. It wasn't a completely accurate data set, but it was about 80% accurate. This was sent out via email to thousands of people. It really went viral. We had numerous reports of how people in public and private sector were using these. In some cases, we had truck drivers coming up from Florida that pulled over, downloaded the email, opened the spreadsheet, and to use that data to determine where they were going to buy food and gasoline, fuel, before they went into New Jersey. Philadelphia ended up being a big resting stop for a lot of people because most of the hotels were taken up. So this became a really valuable service that was provided to both public and private sector. And in the end, the consortium got a call from Secretary Napolitano thanking us for that service and assigned one of her folks from her staff to work with us to continue to develop that. Next one is this multi-state fleet response working group. What we did there was that group came together during the storm to resolve some toll station issues in New Jersey, which quickly spread across the region. Basically what happened was one of the members of the working group contacted the consortium when a number of trucks were stopped at a toll gate. Well, since the consortium had contacts within the state of New Jersey, some phone calls were made, and Steve Emanuel, the New Jersey CIO, was contacted. He very quickly got hold of the problem, immediately contacted the New Jersey Toll Administration, who provided the workaround. The consortium typed it up, got common approval from New Jersey, and everyone involved in the private sector folks took it and spread it across the fuel sector and the power sector. And the workaround was quite simple. It was just to take your trucks through the far right toll booth, leave a business card or letterhead, count the trucks, and move on. It was pretty straightforward, but it worked very well. And fleets began moving across a number of states as the days went on. The next one is coordination with the New Jersey Private Sector Help Desk, and New York City for that matter. The last thing that the consortium wants to do is to impede, confuse, or get in the way of state response. So we work very, very closely with our board members who are state representatives and with the private offices within FEMA, DHS, and our states. And so as the daily conference calls were being held by New Jersey, we made sure all of our private sector folks knew about it and were able to get into it. We had a number of efforts where companies were calling in. We could steer them to the right people or to the help desk and really help take a load off of our states from the private sector. Last item here was locating the housing for victims and workers. What happened there was we were asked by the state of New Jersey and FEMA for some help on housing. So very quickly we turned to one of our partners that came out of another project that had access to several companies who had huge databases of empty housing, condos and homes and things like that. We very quickly got those folks in touch with folks in New York and New Jersey, and we understand that some people took advantage of that, and actually that data used to provide thousands of locations that were able to house workers or people that were left homeless because of the storm. So to summarize, what we ended up seeing was in the middle here is the 6 projects the consortium was working on with a number of partners, along with on the right the other efforts that the consortium and its states were involved with, all came together during Sandy, if you will, as a giant exercise. I know it's kind of hard to think of it that way, but that's really what it was. It had a chance for us to prove out many of the things that we were testing during the food and rail and UASI projects and things like that. It ended up being very successful, and we'll see much of the efforts sustained through the private sector. So we'll provide another update later, but that concludes this presentation.